Before we get started, I wanted to give another little shout out to Bijan Rizvani for solving some technical issues we had and, for making this episode possible. Thanks, man.
I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call A Sign of the Times. Born in 1958, Prince Rogers Nelson is widely regarded as one of the most influential and greatest musicians of all time, who could play a love song just as easily as a face-melting guitar solo. A musical virtuoso who we unfortunately lost far too soon in April 2016. Today we're stepping out of Lake Minnetonka and into the films of Prince. In the early 1980s, Prince obtained a deal to star in a major motion picture. The film was a massive hit, grossing over $72 million worldwide and winning Prince an Academy Award for Best Original Score. That score became an album that sold more than 13 million copies in the US and spent 25 consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart. Following this massive success, Prince wrote, directed, and starred in 2 more films, one being a sequel to the first. The Kid, an up-and-coming frontman, performs with his band, The Revolution, at the hottest nightclub in the Twin Cities. The Kid is trying to achieve greatness, but his antagonistic relationship with his father, his bandmates, his lover, and a rival band led by Morris Day are trying to stop him. Or are they trying to help him? Prince makes his debut as an actor, giving some amazing on-screen performances in the semi-autobiographical film 1984's Purple Rain. Christopher Tracy and Tricky are 2 gigolo con artists who make their living swindling wealthy dowagers along the French Riviera. This pseudo-comedy drama experimental film was initially directed by Mary Lambert, who left the project due to, we've heard this before, creative differences. So Prince stepped in to complete the production. This is Under the Cherry Moon from 1986. The Kid is back. Now a co-owner of the club Glam Slam, the Kid faces the possibility of losing his club to, yep, you guessed it, Morris Day. The Kid challenges Day to a music battle to see who can write the best song. Classic rivalry. You know the drill. This is 1990's Graffiti Bridge. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
Will you help me?
Nope. You have to purify yourself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka.
We're going to have to do that one more time. Sorry, because I have to say, Recasto. Recasto. If you was going to go get a Sam Cooke album, where would you go? Recasto. All right, I'm done. That's it.
Honey, don't you know I slap the ways out your head?
Man, I have never seen nobody chase girls the way you do. I'll stop chasing girls when you stop chasing dreams.
Welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I am Brian Foster. Here with me as always is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
Hey, how's it going? Haven't been on this podcast in a long time.
I know, it's been about 24
It's
hours.
almost as if we recorded yesterday.
Yeah, other than that, I'm doing pretty good. I just listened to the latest Apollonia 6 album after cleansing myself in the cool waters of Lake Minnetonka. It's been waiting to say this since seeing Purple Rain.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a very special episode, and with this special episode, we have some very special guests. Jeremy, please do the intros.
Yeah, so kind of wanted to do a dive into some Prince movies. Kind of a different side of movies where the film itself kind of plays second fiddle to the pop star. Not necessarily unique to Prince, but this is sort of at the heart of the MTV era. And maybe like that would play a role in sort of like, boosting the sales or whatever type of thing. And that was kind of the main motivation behind some of this stuff. But I thought it'd be better to have, instead of me kind of fumbling around in the dark with my analysis of this pop culture and my own interpretations, I wanted to bring in some experts to the conversation. The ethnomusicologists Levon Williams and Langston Wilkins. Welcome, guys.
Yep, thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Appreciate it.
Definitely, this was very exciting, and as we were talking about pre-recording here, this is the first time I've seen these films. I didn't know that Under the Cherry Moon and Graffiti Bridge even existed. I knew, of course, knew Purple Rain, knew it more for the music and the album more than I did of the movie itself. I never got to see the movie. And it was interesting. I watched these actually in the order of Under the Cherry Moon and then Graffiti Bridge and then Purple Rain, not knowing that I guess Graffiti Bridge is somewhat of a sequel in a way.
Yeah.
I kind of picked that up later, but yeah.
That's interesting. That order is super interesting to me. Is there a reason that you did it in that order, Brian, out of curiosity?
No, it just kind of ended. I think it was kind of from our conversation that we had before, when we met before this podcast.
Got you.
And you guys had mentioned that, Purple Rain's good, and then the other two are a little questionable in terms of quality. And so I kind of went in the order that you guys, the order of quality, I guess you guys kind of conveyed.
From bad to less bad, yeah.
So the movies progressively got better as I watched them.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
That's so smart.
I think that's good. Yeah, you're right. Finish on a high note. Yeah.
But I have to say, Purple Rain rocked real hard. Like, that was a really awesome movie, and
Literally,
I couldn't stop moving when I was watching it, and it was great.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to. I don't know. It's like these three in particular. I guess these were the only three films Prince did, like actual films, not concert films. Where he's the star, I should say, anyway. And Under the Cherry Moon, I was expecting it to be more of a musical. I know it was kind of tied in with Parade, but not really musical.
Not at all.
Yeah, not in a direct way, no.
Just a straight, melodrama.
So do you guys know anything about the background of that one? Because it feels like this was, kind of an experimental piece, more in line with trying to do a couple different versions or different genres, never really grasping onto one of them, but really, it was kind of a slapsticky old school movie. It was, a con man type film, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels or something like that. But and it was all over the place. It was really interesting.
Yes, it's true. It had a little Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Especially I don't know, even the Riviera part of it too.
Yeah.
Man, where to even start with that? Where to even start with Under the Cherry Moon? I think so. I do want to maybe try to go in chronological order, but to answer your question, here's my thoughts, and Langston, you can chime in on this as well. I think that there are low expectations for Purple Rain, the film, and that being what it did, doing what it did, I think that just gave Prince carte blanche to do what he wanted next.
Absolutely,
and this is what he chose to do, and that's my guess.
Yeah, Under the Cherry Moon felt like, I guess what they call in basketball, a heat check, right? So, Prince is hot. He's hitting it out the park or, shooting threes or whatever. And he wanted to see, I think he wanted to see the limits, right, of his creativity and how America would receive his artistry. And, I think it's debatable whether he was still hot or not in terms of that attempt, right?
No,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, it's debatable for sure.
It's funny because it's like, oh man, oh god, you're killing me over here. It's funny because when I was I rented these movies for this film block, and I was kind of scrubbing through Graffiti Bridge in particular, and I was thinking just as a kind of an overall thought I had, even before watching Graffiti Bridge. So I'd seen, Purple Rain, or at least definitely parts of it on TV over the years. And it was good to kind of watch it all together and also unedited for TV here. I never seen Graffiti Bridge. I was aware of the album, but definitely not even aware of Cherry Moon until we started doing this. But it's funny, I had this thought, my sort of initial thought before even sort of watching the movies, but just kind of getting a sense of what each of these were, the aesthetics of them. Was that Prince had this style of the sort of sense of theatricality, maybe inspired by George Clinton and that the Parliament world. I mean, who makes a cameo in in Graffiti Bridge. And okay, so he's super hot off of 1999, which came out in '82, goes into doing Purple Rain, and arguably at the top of his game there, kind of like you're saying, Levon. And then by the time we get to '90, it's like pop music had started to change, right? It's like the NWA was already on the scene. Nirvana was right around the corner. Okay, this is like, it wasn't sort of cool to be joyful and loud and fancy anymore. That the sort of like dour, like nihilism of the '90s was about to kick in, and everything was sort of heading in the other direction with Prince, right? It's like he's still going down this path of like, the super loud costumes and like, what's his name from the time?
Morris Day.
Morris Day.
Huh? Yeah.
Morris Day.
Like wearing the yellow zoot suit and all this stuff. It's like
he was great.
Wild to me, actually, in watching Graffiti Bridge, like Morris, you can go, all right, he was a product of his time. Prince is still like Prince, and his, if we want to talk costumes, like he has a costume that he wears during the sequence for Thieves in the Temple that's like some, I mean, it's a callback to like, I think the Controversy era and the Dirty Mind era, where it's like almost like stockings, like garters a little bit. It's just,
yeah.
I mean, whereas I can go, all right, Morris was kind of like in that, like you're saying, in that space of Zoot Suit is classic, so it at least has some connection, but Prince is always on some complete other shit, and like
that's a good way to describe him.
Prince is kind of like an alien. Like he's like he's totally outside of all the rest of our human experience,
right.
And like we can't look at him through that lens anyway. But I guess what I was just trying to say was like that, like the connection that this, like the first film, was able to connect with the audiences that way because he was right in his like zone there, and then he had kind of stayed in his world. And the culture was starting to shift.
Exactly.
Is what I was trying to get at
exactly.
with that explanation.
You can see it and hear it. Yeah, in Graffiti Bridge for sure. Yeah.
What order did you watch them in, Jeremy?
Also, I think like just like the music of Purple Rain. I mean, it's like that whole album is so fucking classic.
Oh yeah,
and it's just like he's also at the top of his game just in terms of like his a lot of his like musicality and whatever. His songwriting and everything. And then Graffiti Bridge, had some great songs. What's the temple? I'm like
Thieves in
right
the
now.
Temple.
Thieves in the Temple, but it's like so that's another thing where it's like the music isn't quite as just like on fire as it is with Purple Rain. But yeah, to answer your question, Levon, I watched them in chronological order. It was just Purple Rain, Cherry Moon, Graffiti Bridge.
I'm sorry for saying whatever I said that made Brian decide to watch them out of sequence. My bad. I can't remember what I said. Probably was a little disparaging. But I'm sorry that whatever I did made you not watch them in chronological order.
No, it was all good. I still think I got the full effect of all of them.
I can't imagine you having anything disparaging to say about any of this stuff. Sorry, Brian. What were you saying?
No. Tell you said you wanted to start with Levon. You said you wanted to start with you wanted to go chronological. So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to take off, please.
So I mean, for me, so it's been a while since I had watched Purple Rain. So it was good to kind of just reacquaint myself with that movie, that aesthetic, that time. Also thinking about my experience with Prince. And I mean, this came out in 1984. I was a kid, and so I didn't watch it immediately, obviously. And even, at that period of time, there was, to an extent, a dichotomy between like Prince. For how I grew up, it was like I didn't have access to Prince like that. Like my pops could watch a Prince movie. I could never watch a Prince movie. Everything about him was a little too risque for me at that time. So he was kind of his entire aesthetic. While I was very aware of him musically, it was like he was bad. Like you know what I mean? Like
taboo,
that's
artist.
the word I'm looking for. Yeah, like it was kind of a taboo, kind of a like adult. Very adult, and I was a kid, and so ne'er the two shall meet. That was
hypersexualized especially in these films. Whew, it's in your face, sexualized.
That's interesting.
Incredible.
I grew up in a Prince household. I feel like my dad had the Dirty Mind album, and I remember looking through his records and seeing Prince on the cover in the panties and shirtless and all that. And, Around the World in 80 Days, right? So Prince was very much a staple of the sonic atmosphere of my household. And, but Purple Rain came out the year I was born, right? So I certainly didn't see it until I was of age of sorts. So, Graffiti Bridge probably was the movie that, I first experienced Prince, right? And then I worked backwards. So, but no,
and that was 90, right?
That was 90, right? So I was like 6 years
decade.
old. Yeah, almost 7, right?
So you watched it the way Brian did.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
In some ways, that's how Prince for me was the guy who, had the perm and had his butt out on the awards show. And then, of course, I, as I grew into my musical understanding, right, I began to appreciate him as an artist. But no, it's funny.
Didn't he already have that perm, basically, or at least on the cover of what was the album where it?
Yeah, he had
the
the perm on. Was it 1999? He had the perm.
That was Prince self-titled.
The self-titled joint,
yeah.
Self-titled joint, yeah. And then he cut it short, and then I guess he always had a perm, right? It's just length is the issue.
I think after watching these, it is absolutely clear that if you were to define a frontman to a band, this is exactly what you'd get. This is like the epitome of what the frontman is. It's like that loud, that very like boisterous person, but at the same time extremely talented and like down the line knows all the instruments, can play anything. The way that he sits down at the piano in certain scenes of this, or when he's strumming the guitar and stuff, it's just you're seeing this brilliance. And I think these, especially Purple Rain, I thought it showcased that part of him so well. Especially those concert scenes. And I know that this is a Prince movie, but Morris Day's scenes when he was doing his concert thing, it's so fun.
Yeah.
Oh we, I was awesome. I had a lot of fun watching, and like, even though I say that, and I don't want to like dog movies ever, but even Under the Cherry Moon felt like there was like some things there that were like very brilliant. Like you could see like pieces of art in there. It just maybe didn't come together right.
I think all these films are brilliant in their own way.
Yeah.
Right. Even if the execution is bad, I can totally see where Prince was attempting to go with each film. So, there's certainly something to commend there.
That opening sequence of Purple Rain to me, like, really encapsulates the impact of that entire movie. Like, rewatching it for the podcast, I was like, yo, this right here, everything is like that. That's the movie, right? Like all of these sort of introductions of the characters, it's done so well, particularly Morris Day. Like you get him exactly who he is in like maybe
in a line.
Roughly, 20 seconds of that entire sequence. And then you get everything about Prince, to your point, Brian, in the performance of Let's Go Crazy. You know what I mean? It's really all set up very well. I like that sequence really, really holds up in a way that I just did not recall. So
yeah, I think that movie goes from, these, like you were saying, that he was a very pop singer, right? It was like very loud, very fun, very dancey. But, there were moments in this film where, especially with Clarence Williams III, that's his name.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah,
especially when his father,
dad.
takes his life or attempts to take his life. That was one of the darkest scenes, and the way that was shot, and like his visions of himself killing himself. And like, it was just like, I thought it was a great, I know that it's not really a roller coaster, but it felt like it was some sort of emotional ride that you were on, and they did a really good job of capturing all that.
I was actually going to say, like, just in terms of like the film part of it, it's like, that is something that like, he does so well in his music of like, starting off slow and like building to something like really strong. Purple Rain, the song, is just a perfect example of that. Mm-hmm. But in these scenes, he would just turn corners and forget to have the connective tissue needed to like make that turn, right? So it's like you think about the scene where he gets the guitar, and he's like, "Oh wow, what is in this guitar-shaped box? Oh wow, it's a guitar." and then she's like, "Yeah, it's a guitar. I'm gonna go check out Morris Day." What? And he like smacks her in the face, and then
That's
it's just
bad,
like,
yeah.
and then. He walks over to her, and it's a full makeup scene. Like, oh, it's all over. It's like it was like boom, 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 boom. It was happening way too fast. And like in terms of like the drama and how the drama plays out, like the sort of like the non-musical porn scenes in the movie, that's kind of how things went. It's like there's like sort of no context. It was nothing but just the highs of a scene, like, and it kind of never came back down, and never allowed you to get to that point of like riding with the characters that way. Like you could see it, like let's say you looked at it in a bullet point sort of outline fashion. You're like, okay, here's the story of this guy happening here. He starts a relationship, then this happens, then he goes like this, and then it comes back and recovers it. But like all that happened within like 30 seconds. You're like, whoa, it's just, it's like too fast to ingest emotionally. But in the music, he gets it perfectly, where it's like, he knows how to like sort of like build to the emotions, and when to punctuate, when not to. And it's funny, you could see like them trying to do this thing in the movie with the dramatic part of it. It's sort of like not coming together that way. But then again, I mean, what are you watching this movie for? Like, like the award-winning performances or the award-winning performances?
Yeah, this felt like a movie built around several music videos.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, it
exactly.
felt like,
Exactly.
I guess today we would call it, a visual album, sort of, like,
Yeah.
what Beyonce does, except, Purple Rain had just slightly a bit more plot, but barely any plot, right?
Similar
Yeah,
to
exactly.
like The Wall, like Pink Floyd, the things
Wall.
like that. Yeah, there's cinema around the music, and I think that's a great way to explain Purple Rain for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a kung fu film or something, where it's like, okay, let's just get to the fighting. Like, we didn't build the talking very well. Let's just get to the fighting, okay?
Yeah, woefully underwritten, and maybe that's the issue with all three of those films. I guess the last one you can kind of blame Prince for that, since he's both a writer and director.
Yeah.
But Purple Rain, having an actual screenwriter and having a professional director,
Right.
you kind of wonder why. You kind of wonder the source of the pitfalls there, right?
My guess, and this is like purely speculative, is that people weren't like, Prince was banking on himself, right? He was like, I have this idea, I'm working with people to create this, but like, this is my vision, and I'm going to show the world that like, you can't box me in any way. Like, this is like, y'all thought 1999 was something. Let me show you what I really got up my sleeve. I've worked it into my contract that Warner Brothers has to give me a motion picture. They don't want to do it. And, there's all this kind of background that's happening in terms of even getting the movie made. First director, I think, kind of the first person that he wanted to direct stepped away. And so a lot of this is just sheer force of will for Prince, and an opportunity for him to show like that he's fucking Prince. And and I think that to me, that's probably like, it's hubris in a sense, but we don't really see how bad the hubris is until the later films, because to everyone's point, this one really plays to Prince's strengths, which is music and visual performance of music. I mean, every time I watch dude, I'm like, man, it's, again, as a performer, to Brian's point, he's just, I don't know. Let me say this, even in Graffiti Bridge, like when he hits that James Brown split back up, like it's
With
crisp.
the smirk,
It's
and he gets the
crisp.
smirk right out.
It's crisp, man. And that, you see that in Purple Rain, that's just like, my man's style is off the chain. So yeah.
Yeah, the performance elements of, all three of those films, there were, fewer in Under the Cherry Moon, of course, were stellar. Like Prince, was magnetizing and captivating and everything. Prince as an actor is just, it was a struggle, right? Because I felt like, Prince, the performer, is already a character, right? Prince is was a woefully shy guy, right? He wasn't, what he presented on stage, right? But
Which is interesting, because like even in the films, like when he's not on stage, that is not what his characters are like. It's really wild, yeah.
Right. And so I feel like in these films, he's Prince trying to play Prince, the performer we all know, and then also trying to play these characters, right? So there's like triple layers of performance here, and I think and maybe that complicates the matters, right? Because he loses a bit of what we all enjoy about him, the genius and creativity, but also kind of the mysteriousness, the otherworldliness. I feel like a lot of that gets lost in his acting.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's especially in between, the dramatic scenes in Purple Rain to the final concert scene, there is a dramatic disconnect with how comfortable he seems in front of the camera. And, delivering lines is one thing. Sometimes the little smirks that he would give are a little, it's like, we could have probably got another take on that one. But when he did those final concert shows, you're just like, you're seeing how smooth he is. Right. And like between going from, like you said, doing the dances, laying down on the ground, screaming at one point, but in this like hybrid, it's amazing. But yeah, it didn't match.
Yeah. And I wonder if maybe it's something else. Maybe it's partially sort of the writing, partially like, not allowing the story to hold together in a way. I mean, because there were certain moments, even during the acting in all three of these movies, where it's like you couldn't deny the sort of magnetism that he had. Mm-hmm. So it's like, is it a matter of like the dialogue is just a little too corny sometimes in Bridge, or actually all three of them, or is it like, sometimes he's less convincing in a certain moment, but no matter what, like there was almost every single time there was something where it's just like, he is kind of like kind of this alien quality we were talking about, where it's like he is something that we all can't recognize in ourselves because it's just so far outside of ourselves.
You mean he's something we could never comprehend, is what you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
but yeah, like that. But even when it is sort of not getting to like the expectations of Kristen Scott Thomas or Clarence Williams III, acting levels, it's not like some of the sort of third tier musicians that are also trying to act here. It's like, he still has a level of, magnetism.
Ooh, that struck a chord. I think you need some time to respond.
Oh man, you're gonna piss off like the whole Prince fan community.
Here we go. What did Jeremy just do?
Look, third tier in comparison to Prince.
No, they were bad. Like, you got, Grindhouse Institute is gonna be the one that gets the hate mail. So I don't have any issue saying that.
Cut this part.
I think that the Revolution, if the Revolution says that the acting classes that they took felt like they really paid off for them, they are wrong. And Brown Mark doesn't even speak in the film, but like Wendy and Lisa, maybe I'll give them a little bit of a pass, but I mean, Fink has.
They were okay. I know it's like they were like passable, let's say.
Fink has one line, and it's a line that is really like super sexist and like doesn't hold up over time. And like if that was my one line in Purple Rain, I'd be like, I wish they just fucking cut that scene. You know what I mean? Like that's how bad like Fink's line is. Like, and man, I don't know.
He's the guy with the kind of purple hair and
Dr. Fink. I'm sorry, he's the one in the surgeon outfit. His line is, Wendy's upset because Prince is being a dick about the songs, and he's like, "Oh, her period works in reverse." She's
terrible line.
We were talking about the same guy. Yeah,
terrible,
exactly.
terrible line.
Yeah.
Doesn't hold up, and it's bad, right?
Yeah, bad performance and bad line.
I love Dr. Fink, but that's just a stain on his legacy for me.
But you make a good point, right, about elements of this film not holding up, right? And looking back on it, I know this is 2020 lens, and we're in a new, day of understanding issues of sexism and misogyny. But man, the domestic violence in the film, and like the throwing the woman in the garbage dump,
literally,
the trash can, literally, like
literally.
It was just amazing to see, from a film that emerges from Prince, who I thought always played with gender and sexuality and mess with ambiguity and things like that in his music. It was interesting to see the treatment of women in Purple Rain, especially.
I mean, even the famous scene of purifying yourself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka, like that's a shitty. You know what I'm saying? Like that whole situation is kind of shitty. I mean, she goes for it, I guess, and he does seem genuinely surprised that she did it, but like.
Yeah. He didn't stop her.
It had been a while since I watched it. I was like, "Yo, does he leave her here?" Like yo.
Well, that was
that's
the part
not Lake Minnetonka.
where he's being a dick because it's like he does try to stop her, but she's like so insanely enthusiastic that she goes for it. And before he could get out,
That ain't Lake Minnetonka.
That's what made her mad.
yeah. But then the part where he's being a super dick, he's like leaves her, and then he comes back and he's like, he's gonna like leave her.
Didn't let her get on the bike. It was terrible.
It's like, what's going on?
This went on for too long.
It's like a 5-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of childish.
It was hard for me. So in some ways, that love affair, which is like the core of the movie in a lot of ways, sometimes didn't like that. Their passion and love, like for each other, kind of just felt, to Jeremy's point earlier, like we were hitting weird vibes throughout, and I was not able to figure out like what is she like about this guy, like that, other than, I mean, he's Prince. What am I talking about, right?
Right, but I think you bring up an interesting point, because that was the only thing that she couldn't let go of, was who this guy was as a performer and as a musician, but as a person, in a relationship with her, he wasn't that great to her. He wasn't horrible. I don't know. There was like one thing that she could just hang on, and that was, I think, his performing.
Of course, I mean, part of that, her understanding of him was that he was this tortured soul who came from, a rough, I guess, household and upbringing. I mean, I think the fact that they undersold that and underplayed that part, made the disconnection between her and him, I guess, much more prominent.
Yeah, I was kind of really hoping that would be more of the movie. Actually, like, because like it seems that that's what they were going for, was that like the domestic situation at home with his dad and his mom, and like their constant fighting and then making up, and constant fighting and making up, and leading to his dad's like a suicide attempt. I thought that was gonna like be more a part of like what, his character, more part of like what inspired his music and all this stuff. It like, I guess, is sort of intellectually there. You can kind of maybe put the pieces together if you're thinking about it, but it wasn't really something there where you could draw that connection directly. And you certainly weren't feeling it while you were watching it. But I did find it was interesting later on when we get that scene where Clarence Williams III is playing the piano, and we, I guess, learn that he's a musician, but he didn't write anything down, and then it turns out he did. A
lot of them. He had a ton of songs.
Right.
But I mean, but wasn't like Prince's dad also, like his actual dad, like a piano player?
I don't know that.
He was a musician.
Was he? Okay, because I'm like, it's weird how much of like real Prince and like Purple Rain, the kid, has gotten mixed up in a lot of ways, and there's a couple things I want to talk about with that. But
yeah,
sure.
That scene with the father, I think for me, hit a little harder this time than before. Like this idea that like whatever demons were causing issues with his father, it also caused them to like really shit on his son in a lot of ways, in a way that they immediately could have connected. The father uses it as a way to be like, that's the difference between me and you. I don't even got to write him down. Yeah, you might be bad, but you ain't as bad as me because I never had to write him. You know what I mean? And like that Clarence Williams really sold that tension for me. Like that moment in this whole over the top movie felt a little real, and I was grateful for that. Another kind of smaller thing, I really want to talk about Morris Day too, but a smaller player in this that really stood out to me for some reason was Billy, the club manager. Not a great actor, but the scenes moved, like really helped pull some of the story together that they were trying to put together. Particularly the scene where Billy is like, you're gonna be just like your old man, like, he messed everything up too, but you could put it together, but I don't know. For some reason on this watch, I was like really appreciative of Billy's role in this movie in a way that I had never been any of the other times I watched it. So.
Because in a way that discussion then kind of forced Prince to say, maybe I should open up about this song that my bandmates created, right? And I need to, maybe there's something there. And then it turned into more of a personal song to him, even though, it was written by the two girls in the band. And then I think that it was straight up dedicated to his father at that point, right? And I think that was the impetus for him to find that personalization and connect to the music, and then obviously it made everyone in the crowd just go nuts, you know. So it worked.
But actually, everyone in the crowd started crying, including the
Sure.
hardened club manager, Billy.
But they definitely wanted that encore, and that's when that movie just goes crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I like. Are you talking about like the very, very end with like the sort of like
God, it's
jizzing
awesome.
guitar that then like cuts to a freeze frame or whatever?
So awesome. So awesome.
That's a good way of putting that.
Yeah, I mean, I Would Die For You is just like a badass song, and like that is like the quintessential performance of it. Like all of the like hands around the body, like, you know, I mean, Prince milks that so good. Like, I mean, I mean, again, just consummate performance. Performer, and I can't say enough about that, and sure, people talk about it all the time. Really quick though, definitely want to talk about Morris and Jerome, and like what I think they represent in this movie, and why I think they, like, without them in the movie doesn't work at all, in my opinion. That sort of comedic foil that they provide, this sort of very traditional, like, mischief-causing hijinks, more, you know, and I think that Morris in particular sells it so well. I mean, just happens to have really great comedic timing. You know, at this point in their work together, you know, Prince and The Time have been working together for years. You know what I mean? And actually, their relationship has fractured by the time we arrive in 1984, and they're doing this movie. So, you know, and Morris, in a lot of ways, according to him, like, really didn't want to be there. You know, this is something he was doing. He was going to get paid to do. But, you know, it was kind of like, this is Prince's thing, and I'm feeling some kind of way about Prince right now. But
Wow.
You don't know that, you would never know that from watching the film, because they seem kind of in sync in a way. And he, although not wanting to be there, gives a great performance throughout, particularly on the comedic side.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really surprising. I knew that they were in a band together, and then that, you know, Prince had broken off or whatever. And I for some reason I had this impression that there was bad blood. But then, I was like watching this. I was like, okay, well, maybe not. Maybe this is like, you know, maybe I misremembered that or whatever. But yeah, it's crazy. And so, what's the idea then that like Morris came back for Graffiti Bridge because maybe the success of Purple Rain?
Well, The Time had reformed, right?
Yeah, they were in the process of recording a new album with the original lineup, which is not the lineup that's in Purple Rain, by the way. And they were the way I understand it is they were working on a vehicle that would focus on The Time specifically. And Prince, because of another project he was trying to do, basically would only, like, Graffiti Bridge would only be greenlit if it was seen as a sequel to Purple Rain. So basically, Prince had to merge these two projects, one of which wasn't even his, kind of together to get Graffiti Bridge made. And that's a little bit of that speculative, but that's my understanding of it.
Is he reprising the role as the kid in Graffiti Bridge? So he is officially the kid in that one. Okay, yeah. And then Morris is still Morris, right? So you mentioned it was Morris and I'm sorry, his partner who was Tricky and Jerome. Hilarious, especially in Under the Cherry Moon. Some of the things he says, I was out loud laughing, and just his comedic timing, I thought was excellent. And in many ways, I think that sold a lot of the comedy for Under the Cherry Moon. I think that made it successful.
Yeah, Jerome.
It's kind of true, yeah.
Jerome is again, they work really well together, and it's interesting to me whenever we shift to talking about Under the Cherry Moon, I feel like, so this is to take a step back. So Morris Day, the Morris Day that we all know, is essentially a character. Like it's an exaggerated version of him, but it's not even really that. It's something that he and Prince thought was funny in terms of like the classic black pimp, you know what I'm saying, who's just too cool for school all the way around. And so they turn that up to 11 in what becomes Morris Day's public persona, right? In Under the Cherry Moon, what I see is Prince saying, "Oh, that really was cool. I want that back. Like I'll be Morris this time." And and so much so that I'll also take Jerome with
Yeah.
it'll be me and Jerome. You know what I mean?
I'll also take your wingman. Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
so-
Because Prince was known for taking stuff back, right? I mean,
Right.
this is musical. Absolutely, that was a good point.
I mean, I think we can get into Under the Cherry Moon if you wanted to. I mean, we could start on that.
Oh, one last thing, Morris Day and Jerome, the moment that works so well for me that like says everything about them, and it's just like this is my personal thing, is the scene where they're in the club, they're at the bar, and I forget I don't know if Prince is performing or something. No, maybe it's Apollonia 6 is performing, and like they look the other way and they like both put on shades and then like they slowly look at each other and they do that kind of like reaction, like that shit is so funny to me. Like I love it, man. Those guys I love them both. So that's it. Under the Cherry Moon.
So this was interesting. This is not at all what I thought that this movie. I didn't know what to expect, to be totally honest. But this is not what I would have expected, even if I expected anything. As this is
Same.
in many ways like a gigolo con man story, kind of like one of those old school movies, and it was very slapsticky in parts, but a really odd mix of some somewhat questionable acting, but then some of the greatest actors ever on screen are in this, and it's really interesting. I mean, I think Kristen Scott Thomas is amazing, and she's great in this too. And the fact that she's in this movie is really odd, and I think she does a pretty good job playing along with everything. But she's more or less the target, Mary, for her trust fund for these two con men, and they're both trying to court her in order to, I would say, win that money.
Yeah,
I think that's the best way to look at it.
I was really surprised, too. Just based on like the poster or whatever I had kind of seen of it, I thought for sure it was okay. This is going to be a period piece, also supposed kind of a musical, and I assumed that it was like going to be in the time of the aesthetic that it takes on, which is like sort of, I don't know, the 20s, right? The Roaring 20s.
Yeah.
But it's not really. It's like it's the 80s, right. But there's this or it's kind of the 20s. It's like, which is fascinating because this is before Batman comes out.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna say Batman. Yeah.
And Batman does something very similar. Mm-hmm. They push it further in the cartoon after that, but they do this very similar aesthetic where it's like they take current sort of 80s. And graft it onto, styles and things of like, I guess maybe the 20s through the 40s in Batman, but in this one specifically more like the 20s, I guess. All of that was really surprising, and that Michael Ballhaus did the cinematography, which was amazing in this, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, in my eyes, kind of failed in execution, but in terms of their aspirations and goals, I mean, kind of represent what I love about Prince, these ambiguities and kind of, breaking away from binaries, right? So, he does it in time, like we just talked about, is it the 20s, is it the 80s, is it both, whatever. I mean, place, France, but there are these two, black hustlers from Miami, right? So you have these meldings of time. But then even the relationship between Christopher and Tricky, which, I searched and tried to find, whether they were brothers, cousins, friends, but even beyond that, they had this, what's the proper way of saying this sort of loosely homoerotic relationship with each other, at least, especially coming from Tricky, right? So again, you have Prince playing with sexuality and gender. Even
but Tricky was the one who wouldn't who was reluctant to say he loved him.
Right. There you go. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yet they came as close to you could be without kissing. Right. Again, I think
Tricky giving him a bath,
giving him a bath, like throwing the petals in the bathtub. Right. This is your homeboy or your brother. But again, I think it's again that's what makes Prince so awesome. He's outside of our conventions, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we saw that in this film.
Yeah, that all of that was interesting for me because I couldn't figure out, again, really placing this in 1986. Yes, Prince is playing with, and this is just something about me and Prince in general. Like sometimes I think Prince is given, and this is gonna sound terrible, and this is gonna get you guys hate mail for real. I think that he's given more credit for being more forward thinking than I think he was at certain times of his career. While I think that he always played with gender, I'm not sure he played with gender with the understanding that like actually what I'm doing is forward thinking and being more accepting and creating space for non-binary kind of things, as much as like this is gonna like he was like a human troll in a lot of ways with some of that. Like we're gonna
fuck him up.
Yep, this
I agree
is
with
like
that.
they're really not gonna be able to understand what I'm doing now, but I'm Prince and I can do that. And so while I am grateful that it pushed boundaries in ways that that opened doors and again created space for non-binary thinking, sometimes I think Prince is credited in a way that is a little that feels like unearned for me. And
but look, but I
Interesting.
mean,
Very
that's
interesting.
like, that often happens with interpretations of art, right? Where the artist's intention, may not have been that, but that is like how it is perceived and how you consume it. And like, I would say that like, especially with this one, kind of like you're saying, Langston, like the dynamic with Christopher and Tricky, also what we are to believe Christopher's love of Kristen Scott Thomas, what's her name, Mary, is supposed to be, and just the presentation there, it makes it seem like that. I don't know how can you read it any other way? You know what I mean? Even if that's not what he intended as the director. And did he write it too? No, he just directed this one. I mean, I'm sure he was, had final say on sort of everything, but like, he wasn't credited as the writer, I guess. But
I mean, in this one, similarly to Purple Rain, it also feels like the women become somewhat props, and I mean, not that this is like unique to Prince at all, but just pointing it out, like, the women aren't. I guess Mary gets a little bit more character developed than Apollonia, but
Yes.
that was something that stood out to me. And most of the women in this movie are just people, Johns for Prince the Gigolo, or Christopher Tracy. So I think a big thing for me in this movie, though, that I do credit Prince for in a way, in a much more, it feels intentional to an extent, is injecting blackness into spaces where at least in the world that's created, it's unexpected. And I really appreciate like every single time that Prince would like code switch into like speaking black vernacular, for lack of a better way to put it, like that. I love that.
Recasto.
Yeah, like
That's the pinnacle of that, but it happens throughout the film.
It's the most obvious one. Yeah, you're right.
And him and Christopher Tracy and Tricky, a lot of it is happening there. A lot of it, and a lot of it, I do feel like, is coming out of gay culture. I'm just not sure if it's in praise of gay culture or trying to make gay culture the butt of the joke. But it's that is present there for me in my experience with it. So.
Yeah, but I know this. I think this was in Graffiti Bridge, but like there was that moment where it's like, oh, the lights go out, and then Morris Day and Jerome, oh no, we have to sit on opposite sides of the couch or whatever. But in Cherry Moon, I feel like maybe I'm not remembering all of the moments, but like I feel like that those sort of like we didn't just do a gay, did we? Type jokes weren't really in there. But that is an interesting point, like that injecting black culture into whatever, like this a place where you wouldn't expect to find it on the French Riviera or where are they, Nice or something?
I believe so.
And the billionaires' parties, and it seems like it would be a bigger deal that these street hustlers and gigolos from Miami or whatever they are, it would be a bigger deal, but that. The way that the film takes it is just in stride. It's just it's just part of the world he created.
And it's interesting to me in this space, and that like sometimes the white people for me became like interchangeable. Like I like there was a couple times, particularly near the end when Tricky is coming to try to save Christopher Tracy, and all of a sudden there's this white woman with him, and I could not. It took me to the end of the movie like. Who is that? Where did she come from?
Yeah,
but
I missed that too.
It's the person. I'm like, oh no, she's the person who owns the place where they stay. Like, okay,
yeah. She's the landlord or whatever.
Right? Yeah, I was just, I
didn't put that together either.
who is
It's like, where the
this?
hell did she come
Right,
from?
yeah. And why is she so invested in whatever is happening? Like,
Well, that question's still valid, but yeah.
Same question. I thought it was nice. It was a nice little story. They took a a very typical romantic car race around a horse track, which is something that you see all the time in really nice dates. But there were some really odd scenes in this, and I thought it was almost experimental. That's how I felt about it. It felt like almost like a student film in a way, but in a good way. Not due to quality, more like because they were trying different things.
Yeah, exactly. They were kind of like you were bringing up, Langston, like they were just pushing it into a place that if this had gone through studio execs and everything else, like there's no fucking way they would have been able to do that. Like, what time is this? Where are we? What's happening? And that the notes would sort of like kill some of that part of it. I mean, perhaps some of the notes would have helped other aspects of it, but then it would again it would probably like quash some of the interesting aesthetic choices and some like the sexual ambiguity. Just as a total aside, like it was killing me. I was like, who is this guy? The whole time it was like the dad of Kristen Scott Thomas. I was like, who is that guy? Who is that guy?
The guy from Beverly Hills Cop?
Looked him up. Okay, he was in that, but he was also the cop who presses his thumb into Alex's nose in Clockwork Orange. Like he
was much younger.
Remember that? Yeah, and he had these he's intense sideburns and kind of a curly hair.
Yeah, I totally know who you're talking about.
so where I know him from, because I was doing the same thing, is from Octopussy, the James Bond movie.
Yeah.
I was like, God, that's who he is. He's from Octopussy.
Every time I see that guy, I'm just like, hello, Mr. Foley. I just do the same voice. Do you guys want to go on to Graffiti Bridge?
Sure.
Do you think we said enough about Under the Cherry Moon?
Can't leave this one fast enough.
Yeah.
No, but I did wanted to say, but one other thing was I mean, I know I touched on this a little earlier, but I was so surprised to find out this wasn't a musical at all. Like he wasn't a musician. It was kind of a straight.
He could play music.
Movie.
Yeah. He was a pianist.
Yeah, exactly. Like it starts off with him playing. You're like, okay, this is going to be the club. This is going to be the place that we return to all the time, or the one we have battles over. Who gets to be top billing of this club. And no, it just it turns out that was just opening credits, and this isn't going to be a musical. That was really surprising to me.
Yeah, I think it was surprising to everybody, which is another which is another reason that this didn't do what Purple Rain did. I think, but I will say this: I think Prince as an artist in general is not one that is interested in retreading things that they've already done. And so he was saying again, now you think you can box me in as the kid, and I'm not the kid. I'm Prince, and Prince can do way more than the kid can even do. Here's this completely different thing. I'm like, to Langston's point, this really aspirational thing I'm gonna try, and I don't know if this is me giving in to Prince's persona, or if he actually felt like this, but like, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it well. It just, everybody else didn't think so much.
He did it all. I wouldn't say he did it well, but he did everything that he aspired to do. I think for this film, at least based on how many different things that they go through in the movie, I think is a lot.
That final scene where he's confessing his love for her / not, and that scene, I don't know. I mean, again, it's Prince and his dynamic with women in these movies it's just perplexing to me. Like, so you go out of your way to show up, when she's getting on the plane, grab her, snatch her. We're gonna let that slide for some reason, like that he actually did abduct her, drive her away, and finally she's like, all right, let's, I'm here, you're here, we obviously love each other, what's up? And he's like, let me get in the back seat, let me put on my sunglasses and go into full Prince mode, and and that's how we're gonna resolve this. Like, that's how you're gonna know I love you, because I also
I'll let you talk yourself into this one. Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's just bizarre to me. Bizarre.
But at least we've been consistent in having a movie on our podcast that has a bummer ending, and this one had a pretty bummer ending. Like it was pretty sad, tragic.
It was uplifting to have Tricky tell the landlady like I need my rent. Like like I'm joking. That little final.
Yeah, you're
joke.
forgetting what the ending was. Yeah.
Sorry, that was the ending.
Yeah, that was the ending.
I'm teasing.
Uplifting for sure.
I'm teasing, but yeah, no. To your point, yeah. That
It was sort of tragic.
Like, here's the thing. It almost would have worked for me if they wouldn't have done. Let me also have my last words. I was shot in the back with a fucking long rifle. Like I fell down, but like let me live long enough.
Let me sit up.
right. You know what I'm saying?
Hold on,
With
wait a
the
minute.
blood just perfect. Like
Yeah, just a little bit
let,
here.
what like similar ending to like the kid freeze frame. Like you know what I'm saying? Like we had fun, didn't we? Like come on, man.
Wait, wasn't there a matching freeze frame in this though with the bad guy from Beverly Hills Cop? I think he does a turn too and has a freeze
Oh, I
frame
think so.
moment.
Yeah.
Right before we go back to Miami. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Freeze frames.
I even marked it down. Bad guy from Beverly Hills Cop freeze frame. There it is. Well, anything else for Under the Cherry Moon?
Well, the only thing what I didn't quite touch on with the whole like no musical part of it. It's like again was expecting a musical the whole time. I think at maybe minute 43, he starts to play, and you're like, okay, finally the music's kicking in, and like then it kind of never comes back. But and then one other quick thing was like that to your point earlier about the code switching moment, like when he's talking about the way that Kristen Scott Thomas would have sex and like how she'd go from quiet to loud to then black.
Then you gonna get black. Oh
Right.
shit! Yeah, no, that was great. No, again, like that kind of stuff. It worked for me in this movie. This like yo, I'm gonna bring my full authentic self to this space, and like as a juxtaposition to how uptight. It's like, the same kind of stuff with like Footloose and other kind of things. Like this is how it looks for a black man to be the person who's bringing life to this, very, very stiff, for lack of a better term, like space.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting to me that the way that music shows up here is it almost feels out of place to me in some of the ways it shows up. Even Parade as a companion to this, it doesn't, to I think Jeremy's point earlier, it doesn't really fit this 20s, 30s aesthetic at all. And, it's very 86 Prince, or I shouldn't even say that because Prince was on to other things by 86. Right. I would say it's very 84 to 86 Prince, if that makes sense. And so it kind of sticks out a little bit, even when they pull out the boombox or whatever, you know what I'm saying, to do in that scene was like we're gonna take her down to show her how we get down, you know what I mean? So.
Which also reminded me of Batman, where it's like Lawrence.
Yeah, love that scene.
I thought you were gonna let me watch them make the art.
I love that scene though. I love that scene in Batman. Love that song from Batman.
Oh yeah.
And Party Man is the bomb.
So the unofficial sequel to Purple Rain.
No, I think it is official, right?
It is official. I read it was unofficial. I read it was not official, but if it's official, Jeremy. If you put the stamp of official, yeah. This is official. So yeah, this was an interesting. I didn't realize that this one was made so long after Purple Rain, though. It's almost a full decade. They took their time with this one.
6 years. I mean, it's 84 to 90, right?
Oh, 84. I thought it was 82. I thought Purple Rain was 82.
It was 84.
But it feels like a lifetime, though, Brian. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
And to what we were talking about earlier, it's right on the cusp of a sea change in like popular culture, particular music-based popular culture, and boy, does it feel like it. Like you said, you watched them in the order of like least to best. For me, Graffiti Bridge was a much more difficult watch than Under the Cherry Moon.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So
even though there's more music in this, and it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, there's a lot of like a lot of stuff you got to get through, like and like the oddly like horny angel and the titular Graffiti Bridge is I don't know what came out of the Wizard of Oz set. Like the whole thing was just like so odd.
The background, it has got to be the Wizard of Oz sky. It's the same exact sky from Wizard of Oz, and then I was like, what?
I mean, at least Purple Rain, like they shot a good portion of it anyway in Minneapolis. I mean, the rest of it, like for some reason the LA River's in there. It's really weird, but like, and then like the Amityville Horror House is in there for some reason. But yeah, like there was a lot of like Minnesota in it, where it's like in this one, it's like, it's clearly leftover sets from Ninja Turtles and like, just like, damn. And like, some like Wizard of Oz stuff, and like, it's just definitely not even trying to place it in our world this time. Whereas at least with some of it in Purple Rain, Lake Minnetonka and what was the name of the club in Purple Rain?
First Avenue.
Yeah, which is a real place. Yeah,
right.
It's like,
so, and this is a weird place to start the conversation about this, but like, so if we're gonna go ahead and say in Purple Rain, there's just a little moment of Morris after doing the worst thing, well, arguably the worst thing he did in the movie, the top two worst things he does in the movie, where the time comes off the stage, they're walking past the kids' dressing room, and they know that Prince's dad is in the hospital of an attempted
How's the
suicide.
family?
And he comes back and he does that, and I mean, I got to give it to him. Comedic timing, 10.
It was hilarious, yeah.
Comedic timing was a 10, but that was dirty. But then you see,
When he like backed up.
right? But then you see, he has this moment of like, man, like that is played for like, who am I? What am I? Am I like? That probably wasn't cool. That is completely washed away because he's like a straight up super villain in in Graffiti Bridge. Like, I'm gonna blow up your club. I'm gonna literally piss in your club. And even though
I have flammable pee for some reason, I don't get it.
Pretty awesome. That was a superpower, though, I thought.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's super villain.
it was tough. I mean, this was tough. This tough one for me. I mean, I just feel like the corn factor was turned up quite a bit on this one.
Yeah, this was a horrible film. Like I struggled to, I mean that with the utmost respect to Prince. I mean, I struggled to watch. I mean, it didn't keep my attention, but I thought it was it really felt like an outlet for Paisley Park artist and Warner Brothers Records artist. I mean, that's what it felt like. Mavis Staples, who Prince was working with, George Clinton, right? Tevin Campbell was signed to Warner Brothers, so we dropped him in that film, right? Purposeless, of course.
All a commercial, you mean?
Yeah,
like,
I mean that's what it felt like, and I love that song, right? I mean,
Yo,
one of my favorites.
Tevin was hitting them steps, man.
He killed
I'm not gonna lie, yo. I was like, Tevin, yeah, man. Thank you for this moment of something to enjoy in this 90 minutes of something else.
In whatever this is.
Whatever this is. But then he goes back inside, and we don't see him again for like the whole movie, and then he comes back out. Like, what was the purpose of any of this, really?
I mean, thinking back to these three, the Graffiti Bridge has like none of the memorable thing. Like, I can't really fully remember anything in particular. Like, I remember the movie, but nothing stood out like how Purple Rain has those moments. And even Under the Cherry Moon has some moments, especially the comedy of it. But this one, not much there that I can, put my finger on.
Yeah, I'd say, just as a movie, like it did sort of at least attempt to put those story pieces in there the way that Purple Rain it didn't, in the sense that like okay, they're gonna do the epic battle for the rights to be playing in the club, and then when he does it, like they're like, oh no, we should have gone with a different song, right? Like he had the sort of low point in his like music that he didn't have in Purple Rain. In Purple Rain, it was like every time he got on stage, it was like, oh, it's the best thing ever, right? And in this one, like at least he sort of failed in that music thing, and then was able to kind of rock the Casbah at the end. But then yeah, I mean it's like you pair that with just a lot of sort of random things happening, and the bridge itself, and like how much they tried to connect it with his dad's suicide, and like, is that actually going to be a thing? And like, obviously it wasn't. But I got kind of excited, like when I saw the opening credits for this one. I was like, oh, maybe Staples is in this. Because didn't you guys just finish up putting a big essay together about the Staples?
Yes, it's been a little bit ago, but yeah, Langston and I worked on a re-release of the 6 albums that the Staples singers recorded for Stax Records.
Awesome.
Yep, that was cool.
I wish there was more to say about Mavis
Definitely.
Staples in this film. I mean, performance is great, but it just felt like her and George Clinton and the others were just underutilized in ways, or maybe utilized enough. I don't know about their acting chops or whatever. But,
I mean, maybe if they were utilized to the extent that we'd want them to be, it would be a full concert movie, as opposed to any of the interstitials in between of story, and it would just be all performance. But I know what you mean. Like, give me more performance, because that was the best part of all of these.
The rapper from Prince's crew, who throughout the film was like, "Yo, you should have let me rap.
When you gonna let me rap?
You should have let me rap, Prince." Prince, I just seen, or the kid, I just seen
The kid.
I just seen your girl. Like, yo, like my man was
out.
that man. He was really like, it was so bizarre, man, so bizarre. Should have let me rap. Like,
It's like, yes, rap is a thing now. You didn't know
what I'm
before.
saying? Like, yo,
Here we are.
I mean, that's it.
No, I feel you.
About that. That's it about that. But that was particularly egregious for me.
It felt too intentional. It's like, I don't know. I mean, the film signified Prince's, and again, I'm not fully immersed in his chronology, but that was a very black film compared to the prior two, right? And I don't know if that lines up with where Prince was going musically. I guess it was, since the New Power generation was more firmly in line with musical trends in Black America at the time. But yeah, the rap references felt so egregious and so intentional, and they were like pounding it into my brain. Maybe I'm just more sensitive to that because I'm into hip hop and everything. But it's like, yo, dude, first of all, you're not a good rapper. And maybe Prince understands that. I mean, no offense, but it is what it is. I mean,
Sure.
He's not Big Daddy Kane or whoever was out back in the day. But I don't know, man. But I agree with you, Levon. That was especially annoying.
I mean,
throughout the
even
film.
Morris Day, I forget which song it was that the Time performs, but it's like performed as a rap. Like, Release It, I think is the name of it. Man, that is awful. Like, I love I love Morris because of all of the Time records, including the Time songs that appear in Purple Rain, again, are him in his element. He's not a singer. He's a live performer.
Right.
But to see him, to even, what I'm saying, the fucking, the cuts, the parts, parts in Morris' hair, plus the shag in the back, like, it was like,
rat tail.
everything about it, was challenging for me. Only because it felt like people who were people who set the cool now trying to keep up with the cool. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's what it felt like for me.
This is the same year. I think earlier in that year, didn't Ice Cube go solo? Wasn't America's Most Wanted 1990?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like like when you're talking about like I do the raps, it's like you sound so fucking out of touch compared to
what was out there. Yeah,
what was out
current.
there, and like what the zeitgeist had moved to.
Well, what has occurred to me literally in real time in this conversation, though, is what he probably represents is a callback to Wendy and Lisa. Here are people that are part of my band that are interested in doing something that I'm being hesitant to, that is probably something good. Like, and I had not made that connection between the two because of the egregious nature of the performance. But I think that maybe that's the parallel that he was going for there, possibly.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But it's not like, in Purple Rain, like, that sort of like led his hesitancy, and then incorporating that sort of led to his like greatest victory in that movie. Whereas like he didn't actually sort of incorporate, the Yo MTV raps into his like.
Don't disrespect Yo MTV raps like that.
Into his grand finale.
Bro, like I'm trying to think of what I would even compare that to, but it's not even Yo MTV raps.
I would compare it to, because Michael Jackson's Black or White came out like the next year. There was a rap performance on that song that was truly awful.
The Macaulay Culkin one.
I'm not gonna spend my life being a color.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I connected. I mean, this you have this big time pop star trying to engage the popular trend in black music now, and just kind of failing at it in some way, right? I think Michael Jackson did it better in some ways, but that's kind of what I connected to, I think.
Well, and speaking of kind of keeping up, like Prince's costume through sort of the latter half of the movie, where he's wearing like all the leather jackets and all this, like, it reminded me a lot of Bad, which I was what 2 or 3 years before this, and
87.
and it so it seems too that like in that sense he's kind of like trailing, what had already kind of broken out as like. Instead of setting that trend, he's like trailing the trend, like you were saying earlier.
Here's an interesting way to think about that and how I would think about that. I think that both, and I hate to end up right at the classic MJ versus Prince thing, but what I would say is that they both were like so in their own world, probably not paying a lot of attention to each other and not wanting to be influenced to each other, that in their attempt to connect to Black culture or to reconnect or to let me not even say reconnect. Everything they're doing is Black culture. They're Black artists. I'm saying, but to connect to the zeitgeist of what was happening in Black music at that time, they arrived at oddly similar places, but taking their own paths to get there. And that one way that manifests is in fashion and all the belt buckles and like this is what tough means. Tough is what we want, and this is what tough looks like. Tough looks like me, Prince, who you may have seen in low-rise tights in my previous film, and you might have seen me in garter, like a straight up garter in this film. But I'm gonna let you know, I ain't no punk. You know what I mean? Like, there's a scene in Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, and I'm trying to remember why he says it, but at one point he goes, "Do it and you're dead." Like in that, to Michael, that was toughness, and that's how some of this shit in Graffiti Bridge felt like was like Prince, man, like. This ain't it, bro. Like this is not it.
Yeah.
But was Prince supposed to play the foil in the Bad video? Levon, did you know this?
So
is that true?
That was
Really?
That was something that was discussed. Like it was initially intended to be a duet between Prince and Michael Jackson. And Prince classically tells this story. You can look it up on an episode of the Chris Rock talk show where he talks about it. And the classic line from it, he was like, that was going to happen. But he was like, I heard the lyrics, and the first line of that song is, "Your butt is mine." And who's going to be singing that? Because you ain't singing it to me, and I damn sure ain't singing it to you. That's... So,
Oh my God.
It didn't end up happening.
Darn.
No, thank God. Who knows what that would have been. I think it's better. Complete side note, and this is, you can edit this out, Brian, but like Prince and Quincy Jones didn't have a really great relationship because there's also that whole thing about Prince opting out of participating in the group We Are the World track. Like he opted to not be a part of that when everybody got together and did that. And I just feel like him and Quincy, I don't know this to be true, but I just feel like him and Quincy didn't have a great track record of any kind of collaboration or whatever. So.
Oh, that's definitely going in the podcast. We're leaving that in for sure.
Yeah, like Prince opted to, like the USA for Africa project, which is where We Are the World, the song comes from. Prince opted to make his own song that would be for the track, and as opposed to participating in that big, huge moment where even Dan Aykroyd shows up.
Right.
Prince is not there. Like that just
classic Prince.
Come on.
Because that was everybody, right? Wasn't that like 50
Come on,
people,
Prince.
50 celebs doing that?
Yeah. I mean, and again, it would have been meaningful to have him there, but he was just like too cool for that. Now I'm coming up with all kind of crazy Prince trivia, but this is also it's the 1984, I believe, American Music Awards that recording happened immediately following. And before Prince got there, this is Purple Rain time. Apparently, for those who were seated around him in the theater where the award ceremony was taking place, a memo went out saying that people were not to look Prince directly in the eyes, that they were not to they're like to basically give him.
Oh no!
And here's the best part of this story. The reason I know this story is because Weird Al Yankovic got that, and he had a message sent to Prince's people that Prince was not to look him in the eye. And so I love.
That's amazing.
I love Weird Al for a lot of things, but that is that's like in the top two. That's in the top two. Top two. Like I love him for that. So
I didn't know that.
sorry. Graffiti Bridge. My bad.
But Jamie Foxx, one of his stand-ups told a joke about running into Prince or seeing Prince at a club or something like that, and people always told him not to look Prince in the eyes, right? And he tried not to. He resisted, but then he like caught eyes with him and just kind of, I guess, became captivated in some sort of spell or fell in love or something. I mean, it was that's funny. Looking
aura.
Prince in the eyes, right?
It's
Aura.
like Medusa, you turn to stone.
Right.
Right. Oh, actually, like real quick, one last thing I want to say about Graffiti Bridge. It was interesting. I think even though in Under the Cherry Moon, it didn't sort of connect with audiences popularly or whatever. Kind of like what I was saying earlier, how he created this like melding of time that was then sort of later used in Batman, of which he was a big part with the soundtrack. And then I feel like at the beginning of this movie in particular, some of that Batman aesthetic came into this, where it was like Morris Day at the head of the Joker table. And the one guy, after eating the spicy pepper, becomes like the sort of smoking corpse or whatever, like from Batman. And Morris Day is basically like this sort of suit Carl Grissom.
Now what time is it?
And later we see sort of an update of like the crazy Purple Rain bike, but it's all black with the red stripes and looks like the '60s Batmobile, right? And it has the sidecar too. It's just like,
right.
It has some of that like these weird connections to Batman in both of these in a way.
I'm glad you brought up that scene, Jeremy. Like I love that scene. Just again, Morris Day's comedic timing, obviously, and like one of Morris's many trademark things is chili sauce. So like him eating the chili paper and Terry Lewis. I love that. And again, it's interesting to me that I feel like Terry and Jimmy Jam also actually had a little bit of acting chops for the very, very small pieces. Whereas, like we were talking about with the Revolution, I was like, ooh, this is rough. like Terry, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, both in their very limited screen time, like felt very comfortable in front of the camera. I thought that was cool, But I love that scene that you're talking about. And for me, it felt, and maybe it's because of the color palette, it felt very Dick Tracy to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can't forget that this was a deeply spiritual movie too for Prince, and this was post spiritual transformation that happened after, I can't remember where it happened. I think a few years prior he did the Love Sexy album, that was about the battle between good and evil and all the spiritual stuff, and I think that directly influenced his work on Graffiti Bridge. I mean, not well articulated. I mean, the angel who gets killed at the end and all that good stuff, but
raped almost.
Yeah. And almost raped, right?
I mean, again,
which I thought was crazy.
Prince and women, man, like it like even so. Okay, so I want to talk about this. Sorry. So Prince, the kid, the hero, saves what could have been. Well, I guess Morris actually says, and I think this is important to point out. He says he's not going to rape her. He literally is like, I'm not going to take it. It's
like when she wakes up or whatever, right?
Yeah, she'll see me and she'll fall in love with the first man that she sees, and it'll be me, and so that's what he's gonna do, which is still rapey, but but the kid shows up, saves her,
right?
Throws her over his back, like don't most damsels in distress, aren't they kind of carried, differently? But like he throws her over his back.
That's a hostage.
Takes her back to his crib. I don't know if he knows about the fact that she's going to wake up and fall in love with the first man she sees. But even he's tempted. Like, literally, does the trembling hand to, I mean, what are we trying to say, Prince? What are we trying to say about women in this? And, I mean, Jill Jones reappears as herself in this, and that whole aesthetic is weird. She was not really good. In terms of acting, she was not very good in Purple Rain. And just in case you don't know who I'm talking about, she's the woman who Apollonia runs into in the bar in the beginning.
In the very beginning.
And then at the end, she's the one that Prince sees crying when he's so mad after he gets done doing Purple Rain and comes back to do I Will Die For You. So that is her again here, which again, first of all, where's Apollonia? Like, that's never explained in the sequel. I thought they were in love, but maybe who knows what
Wow,
happened.
come on.
But now he's with Jill, and Jill is like, man, you're such a dick. And I guess people don't change, and so maybe the kid didn't change between 84 and 90.
90.
But that was rough. That was rough. And many rough elements of that movie, that was a particularly rough thing.
Right.
Yeah. So, Under the Cherry Moon, tricky. I just have to I want to talk about particular scenes, particular lines. So, tricky, and this is another to your point, Jeremy, where like I feel like bullet points are hit, but there's not enough in between to make those moments feel earned. Tricky's feeling of betrayal by Christopher Tracy in Under the Cherry Moon felt very forced to me. Like he went from like, I'm literally watching you bathe and putting, like their friendship, their brotherhood is pretty clearly established as a very, very close friendship, but it falls apart so quickly
instantly.
and that he's gonna screw everything up, and like maybe it's because they love each other. I mean, like romantically love each other, although I think they're supposed to be brothers.
Yeah.
And he feels betrayed in that way, and that's what's not being said in the scene. But anyway, I love the scene where the landlady says, "Tricky, why are you doing this?" It's like, because it's a full moon out, and I'm a werewolf, bitch. Like that shit. Like,
Those were the moments that I was laughing out loud at, like those kinds of things.
so that was on my list to talk about. Just wanted to talk about.
What to say?
So glad we did. Yeah, I mean, it's like, it is wild, like that, it feels like in each of these movies, well, more so in the first two, it seems like it was like almost there, and if we just had like this scene kind of fleshed out, or, had another scene where we explained why all of a sudden, yeah, exactly, does he just flip the light switch and he's like bathing him to like, I'm done with you, like, instantly, and it's like, okay, they
But he started getting feelings for Mary, right? I mean, they do. I think that's like one line that he says.
Yeah.
I think I'm starting to love her, and I even wrote that. I'm like, oh, this is going to take another turn, and it never really satisfies.
yeah, I mean, then they needed to hit that note. Then it's like,
Right.
like just because you're a great artist in one respect doesn't mean you're going to be great in the other. It's like, if you're, oh God, who was Ron Artest putting out an album or whatever at one point, and like things like that, where it's just like, just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at all of things.
But Shaq ended up being a good rapper.
He was in a good video game.
Hey, he did his thing.
Shaq Fu.
Check.
Gosh dang, what was I gonna say about that? So I think it's important to also to note though that like Prince in directing this film, and even though that wasn't what it had started out to be, there was a director that left the project. He's
in Graffiti Bridge.
No, Under the Cherry Moon.
Oh.
He is a black director at a time when that was, directing and starring, period, is just something that you weren't seeing a lot. But a black director directing and starring in like a feature-length film at that level was pretty ambitious. Again, ambitious for Prince. And I think to Langston's point, I appreciate his ambition. I think I feel like this about a lot of people as they peak and they kind of go. I wish that they had more people around them that said like, again, this is not it. Let's go back to the drawing board, or let's go back to what, I mean, without being rehashing, let's stick to what really works well for us. I wish that to an extent for Prince, but at the same time, who am I to question Prince Rogers Nelson? So let's just say that out the gate, like.
Right. And do you think people might have said that around him, but he wasn't gonna buy into that, right? It's like, I can do anything. I that seems like Prince's way.
Fair, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, because I think you're right. I think with a little bit of shaping, I think these two subsequent films to Purple Rain could have been something, but they weren't really shaped.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I will say about Prince that he has pretty good. He's not as sharp as Morris Day, but like Prince the comedian shows up quite a bit in Under the Cherry Moon. And I think that there are elements of Christopher Tracy that are, to Langston's point earlier, are a little closer to who Prince really is as a person when not so invested in keeping the mystique about himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciated those glimpses that we saw in Under the Cherry Moon.
Right on. Was there anything you wanted to talk about, like just sort of like connecting all three of these together and kind of just how, like, where this falls maybe in Prince's career and that whole side of it?
Yes, but I'm gonna give the floor to Langston to start.
Oh. I don't know. In terms of connecting these films, again, I'm not, fully immersed in Prince's chronology, but, I feel like we are meeting him at three different distinct points in his life and career, right? Like, so with Purple Rain, I feel like it kind of documents his kind of rise to musical relevancy, and, he's the genius who has to battle family issues and kind of personal demons, and also professional competition, within the Minneapolis scene, which, I think they, portray really well in the film. Then Under the Cherry Moon, which, again, I'm not Prince. I don't know, his motivations for making this film or writing it. But if I'm reading into it, it feels like it's a metaphor for, where he was at that point in his career. I mean, we see these two working class, black men, from the inner city who, use their intelligence and their creativity to kind of subversively dominate mainstream, white people, this time in France, right?
But white,
as
high
far
society,
as Prince,
yeah, exactly.
Right. So, and then, he dies at the end. So I'm kind of wondering if he's kind of, reckoning with some of the pitfalls of his attempts at, mass stardom, right? Because for black artists, they have at times sharp rises and, hard falls, right? And Graffiti Bridge, again, I think I mentioned earlier, there's this this is him post spiritual awakening, right? He's battling good and evil. And then we see this creative and professional move deeper into, zeitgeist blackness at the time. So I do think all three of these films kind of parallel and reflect in some way where Prince was in his life and career.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about Apollonia. I went back and forth about whether I thought she was a good actress. I think she does counter Prince in a way that works. One of the things I did as research for this podcast was I watched something I'd seen on a YouTube channel called The Velvet Reality, where they talked about Purple Rain. Not the Velvet Reality, the Violet Reality, Prince. But anyway, they talked about how initially Prince's protege Vanity was supposed to be the star, the female lead in the film, but she ended up leaving Prince for Motown right before the start of the film, and so Vanity 6 became Apollonia 6. And one of the things they brought up, which I thought was really interesting, is that in the original version of Prince's draft of the script, Vanity's character would have been named like Neandra or Neartha or something like that, something that could somehow in a weird way be shortened to Nikki. And so Darling Nikki is about her. And one thing that never worked for me until I figured this out, until I got this little tidbit of knowledge, was like, why is Apollonia so upset by Prince singing Darling Nikki? Like, how could anybody in the world know or think that they were talking about Apollonia when the song is called Darling? I mean, and like, yeah, he was playing around with it in the crowd, but I mean, like, it seemed to the audience, it's played as like this really big moment of like the ultimate betrayal, that he would sing this song and clearly be singing at her with his eyes bucked. And I never got it. But if that was originally supposed to be a character called Nikki, all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense, But yeah, that was just bizarre to me. But yeah,
very interesting.
And they said that because of the I forget her real name, the person that plays Apollonia.
Apollonia is her name, I believe. That is her first name.
She took that name, but that is not her name.
Oh.
It was an homage to Apollonia from The Godfather, apparently.
I figured, yeah. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday.
I already know English.
But she brought a different energy to the part, and so they shifted some things around. And I think the Velvet Reality says this, and I agree. I think it brought a different element to Prince, and I appreciated that.
You brought up Vanity. I remember growing up as a kid, like she was huge at one point. Like she was on covers of magazines and everything. Like she was in movies, I believe, too. She was an actress, and it was just Vanity. I remember her name. I was like, whoa, is that really her name?
Denise Matthews is her name.
Yeah. I saw somewhere that she left. I didn't know about the Motown thing. I was reading an oral history of Purple Rain, and someone mentioned that she left the film because she'd been offered the part of Mary Magdalene in Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ, which the part that went to Barbara Hershey, right? But I thought that was interesting.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
A movie that was shot by the same guy who then later shot Under the Cherry Moon.
Nice.
Oh, look at those connections.
No,
Wow.
Under the Cherry Moon was first. Never mind. Yeah, but same cinematographer.
I thought she left because I thought she may have left. I think she was originally a Rick James protege, and Prince stole her from Rick. Yeah. And I thought Rick stole her back because Rick was also at Motown.
That makes sense too.
I want to ask. I mean, that's purely speculation. Langston, I want to ask you this. So the reason, even though Nasty Girl is my jam, that's not the number one thing that Vanity is known for in my life and in my world. I want to ask you, what do you most know Vanity from? Just because I want to see if it's the same touch point.
That's a good question. I mean, again, I had Vanity 6, that record, in the house. So, I mean, I think that's what I associated her with. I mean...
So my first exposure to Vanity is Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon.
The Last Dragon, I figured
that she is legendary. She will never, like... She holds a very special place in my young heart. Is like possibly one of my first crushes. Like specifically as Laura Charles from Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon. Like that is who Vanity is. Like I didn't find out about her association with Prince till way later. That
makes sense. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So that movie was always on cable, The Last Dragon, and I always used to catch it. And I think that's where Vanity in my brain came from. She was also in a Tales from the Crypt episode. And I remember seeing her name coming in the credits, Vanity, and I'm like, okay, great.
Whoa.
But yeah, I totally remember The Last Dragon, yeah.
Love, you guys should, if you guys ever decide to make that part of a block, please call me back, because I got a lot to say about Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon.
If you got two other movies to go with it,
why don't you make it a block? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We'll lead right into the next podcast.
I already got the second one for that. I'll just have to think.
Perfect.
Actually, I got the block right here. Like, here's the block. Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon, Blade, Black Panther. Just
yeah.
Like, so there you go. But
some motherfuckers always try to ice skate uphill.
So yeah.
I said that about as convincingly as Prince in some of these moments.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Another one-off thing that I want to talk about is, like, am I tripping, or was it's Clarence Williams III. I know he's a good actor, but like the lines that Prince can overhear him saying to his mother, those sound weird as hell to y'all? Like super, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like cliche versions of like what abuse is like the house. You never do what I tell you. You never. I mean, I don't know. It's like all.
Well, it's just, part of it is, one, you're probably blaming the writing, and then two, it was probably recorded long after, and they brought him back into a vocal booth.
Yes, that's what
just
it
say a
like.
couple. Say this, say that.
Yes,
zero context.
Exactly right. Also, one scene in Purple Rain that even the first time I saw it never worked for me is that Prince shows up. Dad is abusing mom. He's looking for his dad, and he comes in and he goes, "Where are you? Where are you, motherfucker?" And he does like this Prince, straight up,
the
straight
spin.
up Prince spin. Like, I was just like, Prince, you almost had me in a moment. You almost had me feeling something in this moment, but that inability to not Prince it up right there, really like just took me out of it. It took me completely out of it.
I agree totally.
That scene though, his dad is obviously abusing his mom, and Prince runs up on him. And Dad literally just, backslaps him, like, literally across the room. Like, he flies across the room. I mean, it just took me out of, like, a serious moment, because it was so comical the way Flint just flew. Yeah, man, I don't know. I often wonder what these films would be like with better actors and better writing. Right.
That sounds like something interesting that absolutely no one will touch right now to remake Purple Rain.
Well,
but it would definitely be an interesting exercise.
A guy named Marshall Mathers came pretty close in the early 2000s. Just going to throw that out there. I really feel like that 8 Mile in many ways is a retread of quite a few of the beats from Purple Rain.
Yeah, but I like the stuff in between the Mom's Spaghetti and Mekhi Phifer was actually pretty good.
I didn't say it was bad. I just said it was inspired.
8 Mile's a better movie.
Yeah, by far.
Just like the story part of it and everything. Yeah.
Mm.
I think Kingpin stole a lot from Under the Cherry Moon, especially the beginning when Prince is walking through and eating people's food as he walks past, or just handing him his food, or in that farmer's market. I was like, he's like Roy Munson.
Oh, and the landlord.
Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like the beginning of Kingpin.
Speaking of that Under the Cherry Moon walk through the market or whatever, I did love the scene where, and again, this is just another one of the like super kind of cool signifying to Black people specifically, like that, like without forcing it, that he's part of the community, is when Prince runs up on the kids and like he has the basketball and he's like, when y'all gonna get a job? Like, I mean, like that felt very, very organic. That felt very, very real. And so in this very in a lot of ways manufactured world, when Prince, I felt like when he was leaning into himself, I felt that, you know what I mean? And that's just like a very, very small moment in what I think we're agreeing is not a great movie, but it's meaningful to me because again, that is a theme of Under the Cherry Moon for me, is like that, again, that signifying to Blackness, even if I'm also eschewing what Blackness traditionally is and challenging, things about Blackness as well. So,
no, that's a really good point. I hadn't considered that scene in particular, and it was like, for me, I was like, okay, how is he talking to these French kids in English? And like,
excellent point.
Yeah. No, but I appreciate your reading a lot better than that. Than my like cynicism or whatever.
Yeah, because it had been so long since I've seen Under Cherry Moon, I was like, yo, does he like do any like trick dribbling in this part? I was like, I was waiting for that.
I wanted him to shoot the ball.
I wanted game blouses. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Would you like to play some basketball? I was waiting for that.
Oh man, we almost made it without making a reference to that.
Almost.
And you even brought up Rick James, and we didn't go for it.
Didn't touch it.
Here's another random one-off aside. So in the original version of Graffiti Bridge, before it became merged with this vehicle that was supposed to be a movie about the time, or where the time was the star, it was a vehicle that Prince was going to do first with Madonna, and then
Graffiti Bridge was.
Graffiti Bridge. But this is like a completely like almost the only thing that's is similar, I think, really is the title. And then I think he was post Batman, he was dating Kim Basinger for a while, and she was going to be the lead, and she ended up dropping out, or maybe they broke up or something like that. And so that's how we end up with Ingrid Chavez as that role kind of went to her after the two leads that he had in mind passed.
Bummer.
Wow.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting one with
no
Kim Basinger.
No, I'm glad. I'm so glad. Yeah. Oof. I mean, to hear I'm sorry. What's the lead actress in Under the Cherry Moon? What's her name?
Kristen Scott Thomas.
Thank you. Apparently she I won't say hates Under the Cherry Moon, but definitely it was a questionable thing for her. She doesn't look back on it and go, man, that was a really great thing I did with that crazy ass movie with Prince and Jerome Benton. That was one of my favorite things.
Oh, it was her first feature, right?
Yeah. So I'm very critical of Prince in these movies. I am a lover of Prince as a musician, period. And I love parts of these projects. But one thing that helped me really think about this and try to find good things in it was the sort of legacy that Prince is playing into here, which is like the musician as the lead in a movie. And I think probably the most well-known example of that is Elvis. And when we think about, when I compare things like Purple Rain to, I've watched parts of a lot of Elvis movies because my mom is into that for some reason. And so when I put it in that aesthetic, everything makes a lot more sense, and I'm a lot less like hypercritical because it's part of this legacy of pop stars starring in films. Sinatra even, I think, going further back.
And that was happening a lot in the 80s and into the 90s, right? So I think we talked about this before, Levon. I mean, you had Disorderlies with the Fat Boys.
Yeah.
Rick Springfield, Jesse's Girl had a movie out in the mid-'80s. I think they're around the same time as Purple Rain. Vanilla Ice even got a feature film, Cold as Ice, which was sort of
Cool
similar
as
to Purple Rain, right?
Cool as Ice, yeah.
Right. So, this was certainly a thing of the moment.
Sure. I mean, it's another vehicle to promote, right? And it's a lot of eyeballs are seeing.
That's kind of what I was getting at, like, hours and hours ago, which is like that there was this idea that like, okay, the music video became this like perfect marketing tool to sell the album, right? And it's like, oh, why don't we push that a little further? And yeah, like to your point, Levon, like, well, Elvis got away with it, right? Like, maybe someone else can get away with it. And, with Purple Rain, he did get away with it, right? It's like it I'm sure it helped boost it in the, the cultural mindset, the zeitgeist of the time, all that stuff. I mean, even though I remember in the 90s, like just seeing the poster for Purple Rain and thinking it was corny as hell. It's like this, like, this smoke like blowing past this like this ridiculous motorcycle and whatever, and like he has a very super serious look on his face, and it has that like insane like styling of the title itself. That again, like in that 90s aesthetic where it was like, let's strip everything down to the most basic. Also anything that is expressive in any way is not cool. Right, like a very, very 90s thing. Like so like like seeing it from that perspective, what was so interesting, but how at that time in '84, like he was in line with that cultural zeitgeist.
It's interesting to hear it thought about that way, because I think similar to what Langston said, for me, Prince was ubiquitous. Like, so my dad owned a small clothing store. Like he sold posters from Purple Rain and from the Purple Rain era. That was like a thing that was sold at his store. So I again, just Prince didn't become not cool to me until around Graffiti Bridge time, when that shift was happening, and when I, as a kid, is coming into my own, and like what I personally think is interesting musically is shifting. Like and again, love Michael Jackson, but I would say, for me, a lot of people will disagree with this, but like Dangerous, like so if Off the Wall is great, is on the way up, Thriller is when Mike is at his peak, if you will, and that's arguable. I would say Bad is like over the peak a little bit, little behind the times. By the time he's 91, black music is in full New Jack Swing and actually on its way out of New Jack Swing, and that's when Michael Jackson, the biggest pop star in the world, makes his New Jack Swing album. And so I say that in context to where I think Prince was. If Purple Rain was his Thriller, for lack of a better way to put it, I feel like he peaked in being the zeitgeist there, but his other albums are good, but they're not, because the mainstream wants Purple Rain too, and Prince is like, I'm an artist, don't box me in, I'm gonna do other shit that's still gonna be mind blowing. And it's not until I think the failure of Graffiti Bridge that Prince seems to take a step back, because the album that follows Graffiti Bridge, the album and film, is Diamonds and Pearls, which at that time, so he peaks again, we'll say, at Sign of the Times. So like 87 to maybe 91, 92 when Diamonds and Pearls comes out. Again, he's out of sync with what's happening, and he's still Prince, so he still gets some props, but he's really kind of a little behind the times. And I think that's what makes Graffiti Bridge so cringeworthy to me. That it's like, for me, it's he goes, maybe I need to think about it. Like, I don't know. He's like, maybe I need to reconsider like going my own way all the time. Like maybe there are things I can give them and still be me and still be Prince. That's not
Right.
That doesn't feel. So I didn't see this movie when it came out. I saw it. This is all retroactive looking at it, but I feel like I would have thought it was pretty cringeworthy at the time. Also, right? You know what I'm saying? Like this is just like this is bad, man. This is like a bad movie, bro. Like,
well, and that's just to clarify that is what I meant. Like that, like in the sort of '90s. Looking back at the aesthetics of 1984 there, you got some of that cringe. I mean, even though it was right on top of it culturally then, but I'm saying like in like, let's say even 1995, right? Like you're looking at like what popular culture's like then and looking back at what it was 11 years before that, it was so different, right? And it's so like, it seems like from another world.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about Graffiti Bridge. Sorry, I'm shaking my head. Because it's like, man, Graffiti Bridge is rough, man. Graffiti Bridge is like it's the whole spoken word aesthetic. I don't know. All of that just really seems rough. So, all right, that's it. That's all I gotta say.
Well, do you guys want to plug anything? What you're working on? Any projects? Current projects? We'd love to hear about it here.
Nothing to plug really, but you can follow me on Twitter at StreetFolkLCW. Instagram at Southside Supervillain, and I sometimes write at www.streetfolk.org.
I don't have anything to plug either. I'm just out here working. You can follow me on Twitter at Levon Williams on Twitter. Don't follow me anywhere else. I don't really do much anywhere else. But if you're if you're hardcore Prince fans who are very offended by the things that I said, I'm Jeremy Floyd. You can reach me at Floyd Annoyed on Twitter.
Oh boy.
Well, we'll make sure to confuse those links in the description of this thing. So.
Well, it was a real pleasure having you guys on. I hope we could do this again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for.
This was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed this.
And thanks for coming with so much of the info too. Like that was really helpful, and we love the one-offs and trivia. That's kind of what this is all about. So really appreciate it.
Right on.
Okay, great. And next week we are going to be looking at the Ed Gein trilogy with a returning special guest, Adam Furberg, who was on the Dark Side of Trek episode. We're going to be talking about Psycho from 1960, Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. And Silence of the Lambs from 1991. Yet again, a triple block of horror that we just can't seem to get away from, but I love it.
Yeah. You'll be surprised to learn that we're doing horror again. It's been so long. We didn't do horror last episode. Oh, wait, yeah, we did. Yeah, so just like some of our other discussions, we won't be able to imagine remakes for these because they already exist for at least 2 of the 3 of them. And it will be interesting to kind of like tie them all together because if you didn't know that they were connected with the sort of murders of Ed Gein, you would be kind of surprised to see that there is some sort of connection between the 3 of them.
Yeah, lots of similarities with these, and it's really interesting to go through these together. So looking forward to this one.
Yeah, no, and it'll be fun because Adam will make it funny as well. So
exactly. All right, well, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
Okay, you two. Don't try anything funny. I want the money, or I'll throw you both out onto the street.
That's right, Cotton. Give that Bella Lugosi look. Fascist.